CALPADS Error Resolution CERT144, Special Education Program Record missing for student enrolled at an MPS school. So the first step when troubleshooting any error in CALPADS is always to consult the CALPADS error list. And we use the error number and the error name to identify the reference documentation for an error. Assuming that you've already done that because you're watching this video, let's look at the error description. And the error description would tell us the problem. A student enrolled in a non-public, non-secretarian certified school during the reporting period has no overlapping special education program record with the Education Plan 100 at the same reporting LA. So this generally tells us that a student who's enrolled at an MPS school does not have an IEP record, okay? And so the suggested resolution tells us the circumstances, the conditions, or what CALPADS would expect to see for this student. A student enrolled in an MPS school should have a special education program record with an Education Plan 100 and have a meeting date or amendment date that overlaps the enrollment at the MPS school. Basically, you would have an IEP record that corresponds to the enrollment period at the MPS school. And then the suggested resolution tells us how we might come about fixing this CERT 144 error. First, we'd verify the student has not exited the program, is a valid special education student. The next thing we would do is verify the student enrollment start exit dates within the LAA. We want to make sure that the enrollment record is correct and has the correct dates. And then we're going to compare the special education record to the enrollment record. If we find a discrepancy or if one is missing, we go to step 3, add a special education record for the student at the LEA. All right. And so we use the fields validated to tell us where to look. And so you can see that we're going to be comparing the student enrollment to the special education program. And these are the specific fields in which we are going to find corresponding records or identify our discrepancy through a missing record or data that does not correspond, okay? And we go through this again in the demo, so that's why that was short and sweet. And so there's some general information about MPS schools that you should know, and this will help you understand the requirements that have triggered this error. And first and foremost, MPS schools are specialized private schools that provide services to public schools for students with disabilities. MPS schools are defined in the California Education Code, and unlike other private schools, each MPS is certified by the CDE. Through master contract agreements, the tuition for MPS students is paid for by the public LEA that places the student in the MPS based on the student's individual needs. Non-secretarian means a non-public school or agency that is not owned, operated, controlled, or formally affiliated with any religious group or sect, whatever might be the actual character of the education program or primary purpose of the facility. And lastly, MPS schools must meet those standards as prescribed by federal and state statutes and regulations pertaining to special education. So what does all this mean? It means that we have students that are students with disabilities that attend private institutions. The school districts, the LEAs, the charter schools pay the MPS schools to provide services that are prescribed by the IEP. Because these funds come from state and federal government, MPS schools are held to the same standards and data reporting requirements as any other public school, in particular to CALPADS, right? And so we have these students that are attending these specialized certified private schools because they are students with disabilities. We need their education program information. And if you don't report it, you get a CERT 144, which is a fatal error. To understand how the error triggers, you can go to the file specifications document, okay? And in the school of attendance field, it tells you how MPS schools are reported. And it highlighted here, you see that MPS schools have a general code. It's 6 zeros followed by a 1. Every school, every district that has a student in MPS school populates the school of attendance field in the enrollment record with 6 zeros followed by a 1. This is how CALPADS triggers the CERT 144. You have reported a student enrolled at an NPS school. We're looking at the school of attendance. There's that 7-digit code. Automatically, an IEP record must correspond with the enrollment period. And when you look at the fields validated from the error list, you have the enrollment start and exit dates, okay? Now, this doesn't factor into the error, but there's a school of attendance NPS that is required for students with disabilities. As we stated, NPS schools are certified, and you can find a worksheet and you would put that number, that code for each certified school in the school of attendance NPS. That doesn't come into play in this error, but we just wanted to give you background information. Those two field elements are how we distinguish an NPS school from any other school, but in particular for the CERT 144, the school of attendance code 0000001, 6 zeros followed by 1, will trigger the error if there's not a corresponding IEP record. And so why an IEP? Well, if you go to the CALPADS data guide, you'll find information about students with disabilities in section 2.1.7. This talks about SPED and the SSRV. And very early, it will tell you the 3 different types of active plans. And you can see IFSP, IEP, and ISP. In the middle bullet point, you see that the Individualized Education Plan, IEP, is for preschool students aged 3 to 5 years old or students attending public school, 6 to 21 inclusive. The key word is public school, and NPS schools are considered public schools. They're reported in CALPADS. Remember, if we go back, NPS schools must meet those standards as prescribed in federal and state statutes and regulations pertaining to special education. That's why they're considered public school. And so if you were to report an ISP for a student at an NPS school, you could possibly trigger a CERT 144 error because you're submitting the wrong education plan type. And so without further ado, we will demonstrate how to identify and determine if a CERT 144 error is legitimate and talk about and show you the different steps of resolution. I know you love CALPADS, and we have plenty of it. So for this demo, we're going to look at the CERT 144 Special Education Program Record missing for student enrolled at an NPS. As you can see, there are 2 students who have triggered this error, and we can click Show to reveal that student information. And so in our results, we can see that they're enrolled at an NPS school, indicated by the 7-digit code, 6 zeros followed by a 1. And then we can see the SSIDs for the 2 students, and then information about the error that has triggered. Again, that's the CERT 144. So we can click the student's SSID number, and if we right-click it, we can open in a new tab or a new window. I have already opened the student detail screen for both of these students previously, so I'll just go to the tab and we can look at the student's record, okay? And prior to trying to troubleshoot any errors in CALPADS, it's always advisable to go to the CALPADS error list. And here before you is the description of the CERT 144 Special Education Record missing for a student enrolled at an NPS. So we've already looked at the error number and error name. In the 3rd column from the left, we see the error description. This is going to tell us our problem. A student enrolled in a non-public, non-secretarian certified school, NPS, during the reporting period has no overlapping SPED or Special Education Program record with the Education Plan 100 IEP at the same reporting LEA. So our problem is we have a student enrolled at an NPS school and there is no IEP record. So if we look over to column F, suggested resolution, we see at the top it says understanding the error. This usually indicates what CALPADS expects to see. A student enrolled at an NPS school should have a special education program record with the Education Plan 100 and a meeting date or an amendment date that overlaps the enrollment at the NPS school. And The suggested resolution for the CERT 144 is number 1, verify the student has not exited the program. 2, verify the student enrollment start date and exit date at the LEA. 3, add the special education record for the student. So basically, we're going to confirm that the student is a special education student. We're going to make sure that the enrollment start and exit dates at the LEA are correct, and that will tell us that we need to submit a program record for the student, and that's when you would add the special education program record, right? So these may not always be the steps you take, right? You always want to verify your data in your CED system and verify what you're seeing in CALPADS, and then make the appropriate changes. And that depends on your data, and it's imperative that you know your data. And so the fields validated, the column in the center of this error list description, tells us where we need to look and how we identify the problem or discrepancy. And so we're going to be looking at the student enrollment record and comparing that to the special education program record. Okay, we're going to use the school of attendance, the enrollment start and exit dates to identify that the student is enrolled at our LEA, is at a NPS school, and then at what period the enrollment is using the start and exit dates. And then we must verify or add a special education record by the special education meeting date that falls within this enrollment period, okay? So that's generally what we're going to do. That's what the error list is telling you, what you need to do. But again, ultimately your decisions for resolution will depend on your data. So let's slide this out of the screen and look at the student's record. So we're at the student enrollment, right? We're on the student detail screen and the student enrollment record's in front of us. And I can see at ABC Unified, we have an NPS enrollment in the 1920 year, right? And it was very short enrollment, but it's there. And so this student is enrolled at an NPS school. A special education program record is expected. And so we'll go down to the special education history. We open up the container. There is no corresponding special education program record, right? And so at ABC Unified, I have to verify that the student was enrolled at an NPS school with their contract from our LEA. And if so, I would then add the special education program record with the meeting date that is corresponding or overlaps this enrollment period. And it again is very brief, from 9/13/2019 to 10/1/2019. Okay, so that's how you would resolve that. Now, another method of resolution, if this was an erroneous enrollment, and I doubt that because there's 3 weeks to a month of enrollment period, but if for some reason this was an erroneous enrollment, we could delete this record to resolve the error, but we want to emphasize we're not just resolving errors, we want to submit the appropriate data, okay? And so that's this scenario, this one example. Let's see if there's any variation from the next, all right? So I would go back and I would right-click the next SSID after I resolve the first one, open a new tab. Of course, I've already done that. So we'll look at the student's record. And again, we're gonna first look at the enrollment. Okay, we find ABC Unified. We can see that there's an NPS school group code. So we know that the student's enrolled here. And we see that the student was enrolled for a period of 4 days. So right off the bat, this is one that I want to look in my CED system and I would question. This is a very short time. And it may be accurate because I can see that the subsequent enrollment suggests the student got in a little bit of trouble. So this may be fine and it may be appropriate. I don't know, right? So I definitely want to verify the enrollment as the error list suggested. Then I'm gonna go down and look at the special education program record, and I have not submitted a SPED record, all right? And again, if the student is enrolled at an NPS school, the student is considered a public school student, right? via the master contract, the student education is paid for by the LEA. It has all the same reporting requirements as a student enrolled in a traditional public school. And so we would want record of that IEP. And so there is an occasion where you may submit a ISP mistakenly because it's an NPS school. NPS school students should have an IEP record, okay? And that should be reported. And so if you have an NPS student that no-showed, the parents and the district agreed to send the student to a NPS school and the student never enrolled. And that's a rare situation and one that does happen. And since the validation is strictly requires that the student has an IEP record, it will trigger on a no-show. And what you can do is that's a situation in which you would want to delete the NPS enrollment record if this was a no-show. And you can do this because NPS students have already been identified prior to going to the NPS school. So they already have an existing enrollment in CALPADS, and they should have been evaluated either at the district level or at a school site. And so when you're going to enroll a student at NPS school and they change their mind and they don't go, there should already be a previous CALPADS enrollment record that would allow you to delete it. I have not seen a situation in which a NPS school is the very first enrollment a student has. And that's probably due to the fact that NPS schools are for students who have been evaluated for an IEP already. All right, and so with that, that's how you resolve a CERT 144. Good luck to you, and if you have questions, please send in a service request. We're ready and willing to help.